Beyond Sights and Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
She may not have the name recognition of some of her peers, but musician Donnette Thayer had a powerful presence and a rabid following for much of the 1980s and 90s. First, as a member of new wave favorites Game Theory, and later with Hex, the band she formed with Steve Kilby of The Church. Her music's been described as equal parts ethereal, sensual, and intellectual. Not surprising based on her own eclectic background as both a musician and a scientist. Join us and discover an artist you may not be aware of, but worth getting into. I want to make sure I understand your musical career timeline because it's an interesting one, and I think that I know you did a bunch of solo work before I met you.
Yeah.
And then we had our band that lasted about 15 minutes. And
I know.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there, but maybe we went on tour or something like that, but it was sad, but it was fun.
It was fun.
Whatever,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I actually really rather enjoyed it. And it also really spurred me to do what I started doing afterwards. So, it was all for good.
Good.
And then now you had been sort of toying with game theory while we were playing together. And I know that you joined the band officially at some point, and you were there for a couple of years. I know, a lot of it also, I think that because you were also involved with Scott at the time, as I recall, right?
Yeah.
So
for a long time, yeah.
Yeah. Would I be justified in saying that there was a little bit of reluctance there to join his band and sort of sublimate your own stuff?
Oh, no. No, I begged to get into that band.
Did you really?
In fact, I think the only reason that he'd never had a second guitar player that I'd seen, but he would play all of these wonderful guitar parts on the records, and then nobody was playing them live. So I thought, somebody ought to be playing them live, and why not me? I know them. I've been to every show. So, and also I found a bass player. So this guy didn't want to join the band unless he knew somebody already in the band. And so I said, if you hire me, then you'll have somebody else in the band who he knows.
You get a bass player for free.
Yeah. So we both joined at the same time.
Interesting. I think you have been in bands with a lot of people who have had very, very strong personalities.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're not exactly a wallflower either. So, how does that, for me, I think it's interesting to see how when you join someone else's band, it's sort of their stuff. And how did that impact you in terms of wanting to do your own stuff?
Oh, well, at first, I was happy to play the parts that he used to play that nobody was playing. And so I kind of got a feel for what kind of guitar parts he liked. And I started writing my own guitar parts. So he would tell me the singing parts he wanted, which were great. So I was fine with that. And he also allowed me to add a couple of my own songs, that were on the record, and we played them live. So I didn't feel like I was at all limited. But then after a while, I think maybe because he had access to a studio, so he was able to write all of his own parts. Then I was not allowed to write my own parts anymore, which was troubling to me. And then here's Steve Kilby saying, "Oh, I want you to, write half of everything with me," and it's like, oh, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting to me how when we work with very dynamic artists, there's this sort of choice we have to make of sort of sublimating our own ideas a lot of times, and That's always interesting to me, because a lot of these artists, like Scott and like Steve to a certain extent too, they're very self-contained in that, it's not just that they're a good songwriter or a good player, but that they really almost, sort of self-produce. They birth the whole idea. And especially, once you got multi-track happening, there's nothing stopping you from really doing the whole thing yourself. So, there's an interesting dynamic there of how do we fit into that creative sphere?
Yeah, well, Steve was pretty collaborative, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Scott was more, he actually works more in the way that I do, where it's all very deliberate and pre-planned. And, I, of course, I respect both ways of doing it, but I don't know. I felt like I was able to self-actualize a little bit more with Steve, but it was always so rushed that it was not ideal. But anyway, it was. I was just grateful to be playing with both of those guys. They're really talented musicians.
Well, and I think it obviously it's more inspiring, I think, to be able to work with another partner.
Yeah.
No matter what. I mean, you can always create great stuff on your own, but I think especially, it's down to the theory of I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I don't want to be the most talented person in the room either, because that's what we feed off of,
Right. Well, I think it's always more interesting when you've got a collaboration because, you literally come up with ideas that you would never come up with yourself because somebody else came up with them. So that's how I always ran my band. It's like, well, what do you think needs to be in here? Or which of these bridges works better? Or that sort of thing.
Tell me about your musical background.
Well, I started out like everybody else when I was little learning the piano, and I was kind of a classical music snob when I was little and refused to listen to anything but, classical music because I was also doing a lot of ballet, and I just thought that it was a bunch of racket, the great music that was going on at that time. And then, this is a story I've told a number of times. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but I went on a ski trip, and my mother forced me. She's like, "You're going skiing. We live in Colorado. You don't know how to ski. That's ridiculous." So she forced me to go, and I was just so mad,
It's like living in Arizona and not playing golf. I mean, that's something you have to
do. Yeah, so here I am off to ski, and I'm thinking, oh, I just hate these ski people that they just want to sit and drink hot buttered rum, in front of the fire in the lodge and with their expensive silver outfits on.
Heathens, every one of them.
I was so furious. And then I went up there, learned how to ski, and it was just thrilling. I loved it. And I thought, well, I guess my preconceived notion there was completely false. And what else am I missing? And that's when I decided because on the way back and forth to the slopes, we would listen to the radio. And that was in I guess that was the early 70s. So there was a lot of good music on the radio at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, well, I am so wrong about so many things. I'm changing my tune here.
and also, I think in that era, there was a lot of stuff coming out that had pretty strong ties to classical music, a lot of the progressive rock and stuff like that. I think a lot of rockers discovered classical music that way.
Oh, yeah, you may be right. Oh, I never thought of that tie-in, Daniel. That's very smart.
Well, it was interesting for me because I grew up more of a rock and roll kid, and I remember playing the first Deep Purple album.
Oh, now Deep Purple. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And my mother walked into my room at that point and said, "Oh, they're playing, I think it was was it Prokofiev or something like that? There was a prelude on that album that was lifted directly from a classical composer. And it's so many brain cells ago, I don't remember what it was, but
well.
That it led me to start exploring more. And I had grown up around Leonard Bernstein and stuff like that, so it wasn't too much of a stretch. But I think for a lot of us, the whole the Emerson, Lake and Palmer kind of stuff, and Yes, and all of that progressive rock stuff, I think it really did sort of broaden the horizons of a lot of us plebeian kids.
Yeah, well, they did there was a lot of innovation going on around then. It was really an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. And so that then, of course, basically dumped you down to the level of the rest of us, and you started becoming a rock and roll kid, right?
Oh no, it really actually chastened me somewhat, because I realized how wrong I had been and how much you miss by being a snob. So I got my comeuppance.
Interesting. So what was your first gig?
Oh gosh, I was just thinking about this. It was hilarious. Our very first gig was on the UC Davis campus at a party. And then our second gig was at an insane asylum.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Isn't it the same place?
Yeah, and I was surprised at how much they accepted us, because we didn't know what we were doing. We were not all that good. We were playing original music too, because we didn't know any cover songs. So
I see. So this was a college band?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So what was your worst gig? Was that your worst gig, or?
No, our worst gig was with Game Theory, I think, on the first tour that we took. And we played at a rave, which was actually just us playing in a barn where they had kicked out all of the pigs and goats and stuff. And it was freezing cold. This was in El Paso. And nobody came. I don't know what they were thinking. So our main audience was all of these little animals who were looking in through the cracks, looking at their little beds, wondering why have we been banished from. And finally it just got so cold. I don't remember, maybe this was a different time, but it got so cold that the keyboards would only play one note, so we quit.
But or do everything in that key.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the worst one. It's legendary and among the Game Theory people.
Interesting.
I booked that show too.
Really?
Yeah, I booked all of that whole tour, because we had just released a record and nobody was booking the tour. So I said, we've got to tour it. We've got to have a video and we've got to tour it. So I set up the video. I promoted the record a lot. I wasn't even on this record, but I was in the band. So I called up all the record radio stations and said, what do you think? You like it? Are you playing it? What's your favorite song? And they would just, chat with me. And then I'm like, you think we ought to tour? If we do, where should we play? And so then from that information, I booked a tour.
It was a lot easier to do that with college radio stations back then.
Yes,
you could actually get a
human
on the phone and have a real conversation.
Yeah, I would talk to the program director usually.
Mm-hmm. So you learned a lot about promoting bands, obviously.
Yeah, I did. Somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
I called the record company all the time too, just to see if there was anything we could do. Mm-hmm. And that really was important.
So I know that even when I worked with you, I was aware of the fact that you were also a science bulge brain at the same time. And, it was an interesting dichotomy, to sit and have conversations with you sometimes and have you start spouting off, terminology that was absolutely Greek to me. I'm interested in sort of how the two backgrounds sort of progressed, parallel and yet intertwined.
Well, I always had wanted to go into a science career because I love science, and just recently got my master's in conservation biology, studying lake sturgeon to see, you know, how they overwinter, and got a whole bunch of data about their movements. But there's a serious connection, if you ask me, between music and math.
Oh,
Because,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it's all about intervals and
And
rhythm and time, and
it's very metric. Absolutely.
yeah,
No
yeah.
question about it. And I think that a lot of musicians are very, very good with math because of that, even though they hate it.
And writers too.
Yeah.
When I was taking a class in creative writing, to me, the most interesting and more accomplished writing came from the people who were actually not in the English department. But, you know, I don't know, that might have been just that particular class.
Yeah. No, I think it is, as we were saying earlier, you know, there to me, there's this left brain, right brain balance between it all. And, you know, I think about it a lot, especially because I'm involved a lot with technology. You
Yeah.
know? And in music production, you know, one tends to be involved in technology, you know, and, you know, the whole idea of using a lot of, you know, a lot of the tools that we use, whether it's a mixing console or whether it's a guitar, you know, you have to go through a certain left brain phase.
Yes.
In order to make it invisible enough that it becomes part of the right brain creative process.
Or just writing lyrics and music, you know, that's
exactly.
your left and right brain.
Exactly. You know, and being able to sort of make those cross connections, you know, between the technique / technical / you know, mathematical science side of it, and the side of it where you just let things come to you and be creative, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I think that's
to me the harder thing.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's fascinating that, you know, to me, I think concepts like, for example, musical arrangements, you know, and especially if you talk about classical music, you know, where you're writing for an orchestra, you know, I'm fascinated by the idea that somebody can write for a symphony in their head.
I can't even, I mean, it boggles my mind just to think of that, you know.
Yep. And, you know, as a parallel to that, I'm fascinated by things like, you know, there are civil engineers whose entire job it is to figure out how I can time the traffic lights of this east-west street to synchronize. And then I have a north-south street that I've also timed, and let me make, you know.
Oh yeah.
Like that, you know, and
right.
Like just the,
or even the repartitioning the electoral districts, you know, I mean, there's a tool online where you can try to gerrymander things and get it to be even, and it's really hard to do.
I'll bet.
It's really easy to mess it up though, and slant it how you want it.
Of course. We've seen plenty of proof of that. Thank you very much.
But I mean, juggling all of these things so that they work is really, humanity always amazes me. I'm always impressed by what people can do.
It's true. And actually, you know, if you think about it, I mean, a lot of that creative data usage that people are into even now, you know, with all of the data you can get online, it's just mind-boggling, you know. And when I see the way some of these people crunch it, I think, damn, you are every bit as creative as, you know, the best guitar players I know.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me. So, so now you've been through several careers since really playing music full time.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
And I think you were a coffee shop owner at one point, I believe, or
right. Yeah, that was a disaster.
Was it?
I hated it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think anything having to do with customer service is, it takes a certain amount of zen.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think I was probably doing water and wastewater chemistry, wet chemistry when I knew you. I did that for a long, long time. I think that's what I did mostly. I loved that. And what else did I do? Worked for the Metropolitan Water District doing, water quality treatment information stuff and collecting samples and then what else? And then, then I went on to do information technology, where I was doing information security and, running Unix things to set up users. And that was a long time ago, back in the 90s. And then I just stayed home with my daughter for a few years. And then after that, I started teaching chemistry. And English also.
Oh, really? You're teaching English?
Yes, and it bothered the English department at my high school quite a bit because they just didn't think that you could teach both English and chemistry. It just didn't seem like something somebody could do.
No, I don't know. I mean, they're both foreign languages in a way,
That's very good, Daniel.
But well, I'm trying to think where else I can lead this because
I live in Canada now. That's another
that was another thing. I want to know about that because you materialized in Southern California for a while, and then all of a sudden you went from literally like where you were like Silver Lake or something, right? I mean, you were pretty much like
Montecito Heights, yeah.
You were pretty much in the thick of the LA hipster scene. And, then all of a sudden, I'm in a farm in the middle of bumfucked Canada. How did that happen?
I'm way up north here, but it's actually quite a large city, Edmonton.
Oh, you're near Edmonton. Okay.
I'm in Edmonton.
Oh.
And that's because my husband, John, got a teaching position up here at the university.
Is he Canadian?
No, they invited him, and we're both Canadian citizens now, dual citizens. But at the time, not. And then he was offered an opportunity to run an airborne program in Nebraska. And that's probably the bumfuck that you're thinking of right there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, man.
Yeah. But Lincoln is a nice place, and he's been getting some interesting data, hyperspectral data on biodiversity. So, that's what his main focus is these days.
Yeah, it's good to have dual citizenship, though. That's
yes, it is
nice in these uncertain times.
Yes.
More and more lately, the two movies that pop into my mind are Mad Max and Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
So
Clockwork Orange. Well, then there's some behavioral science there. That one. I love Anthony Burgess. He's great.
Yeah, and I mean, I've gotten very, very into, the whole art of cinematography in the last few years too. Just learning more about video and about editing video, and sort of integrating visuals into my own palette. Kubrick was absolutely.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Holy shit!
Yeah, a genius.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I love integrating all the arts, and that's why I'm really fascinated with all the stuff you're doing. And now you're talking about now starting a vineyard as well.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Well, it's actually going really well, and we've got about 3 or 4 acres of grapes. And what we're trying to do is we're establishing this, it's called a common garden approach to the vines, the different grapes, so that you can tell the difference. I mean, if you're one of these people who tastes a lot of wine, then, you want to be able to tell one grape from another. But that's really hard to do in a lot of cases because they treat each wine differently. Each wine has a different place that it's grown, terroir, and different winemaking treatment, oaking, not oaking, malolactic acid or no. So what we're trying to do is just grow a whole bunch of different kinds of grapes and then use them to make wines exactly in the same way, so that the only difference, the only dependent variable, I guess, would be the grape itself. So that's our approach.
Spoken like a scientist.
Well, John and I are both really love science, so he's actually a scientist. I don't know. I'm kind of a dilettante, but he is a real science guy. So.
Well, I think I think you're selling yourself short by calling yourself a dilettante, because I think we all, I think you have a certain autodidactic tendency.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah,
as do you.
Yes. Well, it takes one to know one, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like to think that the problem with being autodidactic is that it tends to in certain senses lead to, I would say, a mild case of imposter syndrome. We never feel like we're good as the real experts because, no, I just kind of dabble, and, the fact that we've been dabbling in so many things for so long, oftentimes we turn around and we go, expert, you talking to me, and I've had that happen to me as well. And I think it's, it's interesting that we sometimes sell ourselves short in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you have had a brilliant career, and I love the way you're marrying all these things, and all these aspects.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I was going to say there's a certain lateral thinking ability that you can gain from having a lot of disparate experiences.
I think so too. And I think that's what, in certain ways, I mean, that's why I love, guys like Richard Branson or Elon Musk, it's like, oh, let's see, what's he doing today? Because there is that sort of, and my kids like to point to it as, a sort of a form of ADHD, which, okay.
Well, I think it might be.
It might be. They didn't call it that when we were growing up,
No, and I probably have ADHD, but I am proud of that aspect of me.
Absolutely. I consider it a superpower. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of learning how to harness it like any other talent,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for agreeing to chat with me. I think it's been absolutely fun and really cool to catch up with you.
Oh, yes. Very nice to catch up with you.